Right, so we're gonna get started. Let's first look at our offer practice scenario for today. This was something just a little bit different because we haven't done a condo, I think, in a while. So hopefully you guys took some time to go through a condo offer to purchase, and that way we can talk through a little bit more about what's involved in a condo. So our offer scenario, we'll read through the MLS. Our buyer has buyer agency with us. They're a first-time home buyer. They do have a conventional mortgage. And then again, just my helpful hint at the bottom there was to make sure you're using the correct offer to purchase form. Because when you are in zip forms, you are going to need to use a residential condo offer to purchase, not a residential offer to purchase. So make sure that you're using the condo offer when you write a condo offer. But let's look at the MLS listing. So this is a condo in Waukesha. It's on the market for $345, 3-bedroom, 3-bath. Couple things that you want to note when you're working with condos and condo buyers. First thing is this condo fee. So on a residential, like an HOA fee, it could be yearly, it could be quarterly, it could be monthly fee. However, with condos, we're always going to put the monthly fee here in the MLS. So even if it gets assessed quarterly, we still want to break that down into a monthly fee that goes into the MLS. So just keep that in mind. You're on the listing side. It is the monthly condo dues. Units and project, units and building. So units and project is how many units are actually in that whole condominium. And so in Woodbury Commons here, there's 48 condos. And then units in building 4. So this is a good way for you to know, like, is it maybe like a side by side? There would be 2 units in the building. This is a quad, so there's like 4 different units that kind of butt up against each other. So some, like if you're downtown Milwaukee and you're in like a high tower, obviously the units in building will probably match the units of the project. So some of your buyers could be a little particular in wanting a condo that feels a little bit more like a single family house. You might be looking then for either 2 units in the building, 3 or 4 units in the building. Once you start getting 4 or more, you start getting like upstairs and then downstairs and that sort of thing. But if you're generally looking at like 2 units in a building, those are probably going to be side by side. So when you're working with condo buyers, I think that's also a good question to ask them. Just in general, when they're describing their perfect condo to you, are you looking for something that has a lot of units, like a high rise downtown, or are you looking for something a little more secluded? The other thing over on the MLS is the pets policy. So you'll always mark whether or not pets are permitted, and then the listing agent will also hopefully give some details about what type of animals are permitted. The options are a little bit limited in what you can select in the MLS, so your buyer still needs to do their due diligence of reading through the condo docs. The executive summary does summarize the pet policy, so you just want to make sure you get that information to them before you write an offer. I've seen so many buyers try to back out of a deal because, oh, they didn't know that their dog wouldn't be allowed. We can prevent a lot of that up front if we just have that executive summary and the buyers read that first. And then you as an agent, when you're working with buyers, definitely make sure this is part of your buyer consultation. Do you have any pets? What kind of pets? Do you have a dog? What kind of dog? How much does it weigh? That sort of thing. Because those are questions that can get answered by the HOA before we ever write an offer. Let's not just keep writing offers on properties that our buyers aren't going to close on, right? A couple of other things to think about with condos is here it says floor number 1. That is the floor that you enter the unit on. So you'll see down here building style, it is a 2-story, but the unit style is 1 story. So this unit is on the main floor of a 2-story building with 4 buildings in the unit. Does that make sense? So you would enter floor number 1 onto the main floor. But it is a two-story building, so there will be neighbors above this unit. So again, that's kind of how you can determine whether or not this might even be worth a property showing to your clients, depending on the conversation you've had with them regarding what they're looking for in a condo. Okay. Another big thing to be aware of with condos is the parking situation. So they're all going to be different. This condo specifically has a private garage. So I'm guessing it's probably attached based upon it just being a newer property, but it could be a detached private garage that goes with the property. Is there parking spaces outside of the garage? Do they have like guest parking so that people can come over and visit your buyer? What is that parking situation? And then also, it's really important for buyers to understand if there's an additional cost to that parking. So there might be a situation where maybe you're in like downtown, where they give you like one parking spot, but you can also pay for additional parking, or none is included, but you can buy a parking spot for X amount or rent it. So make sure you are understanding the parking situation, making sure that your buyer understands the parking situation with condos, so that they know what's included and not included with the property. And then the last thing that's probably really important for condo buyers is the common amenities. So this one just has common green space, but things that could be common amenities are like a clubhouse with a gym, a pool, just a barbecue area, things like that. So, what additional amenities do they want with their condo complex? Will help you determine whether or not this would be a good fit for your buyers, right? So in general, the specific condo that we're looking at here is kind of feels like more of a single family residential type of condo. There is a 4-unit, so they will have neighbors upstairs. Pets are permitted. There is an attached private garage, and there's not really any additional amenities outside of just their condo itself. So your buyer likes this, wants to move forward, we can go ahead and start drafting that offer on that condo. The next thing that I would make sure that I'm looking at with the MLS listing of a condo is the documents. This is going to be probably one of the most important things with condos, are those condo documents. A good listing agent like we see here is going to have all those condominium documents uploaded into the MLS. My personal belief is that this does not count as delivery of those condo docs. So me as a listing agent would have all these condo docs in an email ready to hit send to the buyer's agent as soon as that offer is accepted. That way I can be certain as a listing agent that I've done my job in delivering these condo docs to that buyer's agent. Okay. The last thing you ever want to assume is that the buyer's agent was savvy enough to get the docs off the MLS and give them to their buyer. So I want to make sure that I do everything in my power to ensure delivery of those documents, which is to send them to the buyer's agent. So we're going to take a look at some of these condo docs because a lot of them are unique to a condo development. The seller condition report. So in general, the seller condition report isn't going to be any different than a residential condition report. Okay. This one scenario is a little bit unique because the buyer has stated, or the seller has stated, that due to them being a personal representative of the estate and never having actually occupied the property, they are not required to complete this condition report. So it is true that some personal representatives do not have to complete condition reports. Usually that's at the advice of the attorney who is helping with the estate. Okay. So they went ahead and filled out what we call a seller refusal regarding the condition report. You can find this in zip forms if you're on the listing side. And basically is exactly what it sounds like. I'm refusing to fill out this condition report. And why do I feel like I shouldn't fill it out? Because I'm not required to because of one of the following. Okay. So hopefully you'll see this with maybe new construction. They should be filling out line 27, that it's never been inhabited. properties that are exempt from the real estate transfer fee are your like charities or your churches, so they wouldn't have to fill out a condition report. Just be aware of that. Your buyer, this is the condition report then that you give to your buyer. Okay, so you would still want to put your information that you delivered this refusal to your buyer, and then your buyer's going to acknowledge that they've received it. Okay. Any questions on that?
Nope, makes sense.
Nope, thank you.
The next thing we have that goes with the condition report is the condominium addendum to the real estate condition report. So best practice is to just go ahead and fill this out. It's really the information on here is just, whoop, sorry, my Zoom is being a little funky wonky. Is just about some of the information about the property, like the association management company, and you as the broker. So go ahead and fill this out. The condo contact information, so name of the condominium, the unit number, when it was recorded. So this condo was built in July. That's not right. That's not the right date. So just FYI, that date should be the date that the condos were actually created by deed. The contact information, always just put you as the listing agent here in this section. I would never want a buyer or a buyer's agent to reach out directly to my seller when I'm representing them. So me as a listing agent would always just put the unit agent's listing broker information, and I would strike out unit owner. And then this is the association information. So how can somebody get in contact with the condo association? It's hired or retained management, and here's the name of the management company. Okay. If it's self-managed, there's probably somebody that lives on the property that's also managing the condo association. It would have their information there. And then the condo dues. So this is $355 per month. So this would be a great place, like say that those dues are assessed quarterly instead. You would make that acknowledgement here that the dues are paid quarterly, and have all current charges been paid, yes or no. Sometimes when you see a personal representative like this selling a condo, they might be behind on their condo dues. Those dues would get paid out of the seller's closing proceeds at closing. They'd be then paid to the condo association. But this is just a good way for us to know whether or not we're behind on condo dues that we need to pay them. Okay. And then again, buyer needs to acknowledge a receipt of this report as it is part of that real estate condition report.
Hey, Kathleen, can I ask a quick question or just like a clarifying question? So the record obviously is filled out by the seller, but I think I heard you say that you as the listing agent can fill this out and send it to your seller just for signature, or are they filling it out?
I usually fill it out just because I want to put like my information on here. And I obviously have the information of like what the condo is called. Technically, I might get yelled at by compliance, but technically the seller should be filling this out because it is part of that condition report. However, like I might not necessarily have the association information right then and there. So maybe I would put some lines on the DocuSign to have them fill out the association information. Something like that. But I would at least, as a listing agent, at least fill out lines 13 through 17 for my seller, just so they didn't feel like they had to put their information there.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. And then this is the most annoying thing about this condo addendum. It is 2 pages. The second page is a bunch of legalese. There's no like initials or signatures on that second page. However, you have to attach the second page as well. So please make sure that you're uploading it in Command. Make sure that you're sending it to your buyers with the second page, and make sure that second page is uploaded into MLS when you're on the listing side. Okay, it's often missed. All right, so now we're getting into some of the more specific condo docs, and the first one is the executive summary. So an executive summary is essentially what that means, right? The condo association fills this out for you, for your sellers, and it helps outline a lot of the general information that they would find if they sat down and read like the 900 pages of condo docs. These are usually the most frequently asked questions. That's kind of how you can think of it. This does not replace the need for the buyer to review the condo docs though. Okay, so the executive summary is a great overview of the condo docs. It'll help us answer questions really quickly, like what is the pet policy? However, it's not all inclusive and the buyer still has to do their due diligence of reading through all those condo docs. I know that's a lot, but they should still do it, okay? So who's the condo, a condo association managed by? Again, same question. The parking arrangements, so this one is the garage is assigned to each unit. They get their parking spots that are in front of their respective garage, so probably like a driveway. Do they have to pay any extra parking? No. It's deeded with the plat, so it can't be like sold separately. A little bit more about the parking and then parking restrictions. So this is also really good for buyers to know that they cannot have any like boats or campers or RVs or anything like that in the parking areas. So they need to figure out how to store them inside or store them off-site somewhere else. Okay. Then we get into the pet policy. Are pets allowed? Yes. What kinds? Both dogs and cats. What are the restrictions? So there's all the restrictions on those animals, okay? I like that on each section, it does reference where in the condo docs they can read the policy so they can get more details about that policy as well. Can you rent your condo unit? This is a big one, especially when you're thinking about like some of those downtown condos. Can they do rentals there? So this one, yes, you can rent your condo. What are the limitations? And then it'll explain it there. So sometimes it'll say things like rentals have to be in at least a 12-month lease, meaning that they can't do short-term rentals. So if you have an investor who's looking for basically an Airbnb downtown and they're looking at condos, they're going to have to be very certain in those condominium documents that it's allowed. Okay. Are there any special amenities or features? This one says no, but it could be things like the workout room, the clubhouse, the swimming pool, things like that. What are my maintenance and repair responsibilities? So I would say 85% of your condos, the condo owner is only responsible for the interior of the unit. Everything else that's outside the unit is responsibility of the association. So like the roof would be the responsibility of the association. So that means the roof would fall under a common element or a limited common element. And so this outlines what those are and who's involved in the maintenance for those. Okay. I have seen some small condo units where it's literally only 2 units. There's no real association because it's so small. And so, of course, the condo owners are responsible for the maintenance and they just share it, the cost 50-50. So just be aware that this can really be done in all sorts of ways. Each condo is going to be unique. There's no 2 condos that are the same. So when you're doing condo transactions, you have to look at it with a fresh set of eyes. Don't go in with any judgment about how it might work. Make sure you're reading through those documents so that you understand it and so that your buyer understands it. Does the condo association maintain a reserve funds for their repairs? Yes, they do. So currently, as the date of this executive summary, there was $41,000 in reserves in that account. So let's just go say, you know, there's 12 buildings in this condo association, and they wanted to replace the roofs on all 12 of them. Well, obviously, one roof is 20,000, so 12 roofs is definitely going to be more than $40,000, right? And they also need to keep some amount of money in reserves. So most likely the condo will have to do an assessment to get those funds from the condo owners. So they would say, you know, we're going to use $30,000 worth of our reserves to offset that cost. And let's say the other 70,000, we're going to go out to all the homeowners, all 48 of you, and assess, you know, X amount of money. That's going to go into the pool to be able to replace the roofs. So it's understanding how much is in the reserve balance is really important, because it's a show of whether or not the right amount of monthly dues are being used or being taken from the homeowners, if they're paying into the pot enough, if it's being well managed by the management company, or whoever is managing the association. If you see a reserve balance that's like scarily low, like 5,000 in there, obviously they wouldn't be able to do any repairs with that sort of money. So I would be very cautious about a condo association that doesn't have a very large reserve fund, just in general. Let's see. Are we expanding this condo association? No, there's probably no room. Can I alter my unit in any way? So that's also outlined in the condo docs. Have there been any condo materials have been amended in any way? Yes, Wisconsin law allows the unit owners to amend the condo docs if enough votes are obtained. Okay. Does the association have a right of first purchase? This is also called the right of first refusal. So when you go to sell a condo, let's pretend we're listing agents. The first question, one of the questions we should ask is, does the association have the right of first refusal? Meaning, if I put my condo on the market and I get an offer and my seller accepts that offer, we then have to submit that offer to the condo board, who then will decide if they want to purchase that condo for the same terms as outlined in that accepted offer. That is the right of first refusal. It's kind of rare, even if there is a right of first refusal, it's rare that the condo unit would then say, yes, we want to buy this condo. The only reason they would do that is if they feel that they can make a obscene amount of money renting it out for the association. I don't really see that happen a lot. So I don't want you to I don't want you to feel like you have to scare off buyers if there is a right of first refusal. I just need you to kind of understand what it means. Sometimes there is a right of first refusal, but when you talk to the association, they're like, yeah, we just don't have any interest. So whatever, like ignore it. If they say that to you, I would get that in writing, like with somebody's signature on it, kind of, that says like, we're waiving our right of first refusal for this property. Just so in case in a year it came back and they said, oh, well, we wanted to buy that unit, you had it in writing. So I have seen that a handful of times. Another thing you really need to be hyper aware of is this transfer fee. So we do talk about this with the residential homes as well in HOA. They do charge a transfer fee. This transfer fee is literally for them to set up an account for the new owner. That's what it is. And sometimes they charge an obscene amount. So this association charges 2 months of the monthly condo fees, which I think we saw was like $433. So they're charging $900 in a transfer fee. Your offer to purchase outlines who's responsible for paying that transfer fee at closing. So make sure you know how much the transfer fee is. Make sure you talk to buyers, because I think it does default to the buyer paying. So you can just be like, hey, buyer, just know that you're going to be charged $900 from the association at closing to set up your account with them. Is there a charge for the condo docs? It is the right of the association to charge a small fee for condo docs. So $50 is what they charge the seller. And then is there a fee for a payoff statement? So when you go to sell the unit, is there a fee for the association dues payoff? And no for the first one, yes, if you ask for a second one. So, And then this executive summary went ahead and attached that balance sheet for the assessment bank account that had the $41,000, I believe. Oh, not quite what this says. Ooh, and that's the executive summary. What questions do you have on that? All right, all good. I'm going to keep going. The next documents you're going to see are basically all the bylaws, the rules and regulations, the articles of incorporation. I'm not going to open all these up. This is when we refer to condo docs. These right here are what we're referring to. Okay, the rules and regulations, the bylaws, all of that. Let's see what this disclosure is. Oh, okay. Disclosure of material adverse fact. You as a listing agent are responsible for disclosing material adverse facts in writing. Now, hopefully you don't really have any knowledge of anything outside of what your seller has already disclosed via the condition report. But in this scenario, the seller obviously had that refusal of the condition report to fill out, and they filled that out saying they weren't aware of any defects. However, the listing agent felt that they did have knowledge of a defect, and so it is that agent's duty to disclose it. So you can find this form in zip forms, the WRA form, says disclosure of material adverse facts. I, the agent, am hereby disclosing that I have knowledge of this adverse fact, and then you describe what that is. So Demera has told us that there's a small amount of water that was discovered under the basement carpet after the 1,000-year flood in August. Came from a window well during the rain. Seller had it remediated immediately. All basement carpet and pad was replaced, and the drywall and trim removed and replaced an affected area by a licensed contractor. Okay. Water damage is a defect. And even though it's been cleaned, we still have a duty to disclose that defect. So it's great that she went ahead and filled this out because her seller refused to disclose it. The liability that does fall on her in that scenario. So she's taking the liability off herself by disclosing it. So you would want to make sure that your buyers initial that they've read and received this so they are aware of that disclosure. Okay.
So Kathleen, just as the listing agent, I know I'm flipping back and forth between buyer and listing agent, but if you see something like this that you then need to disclose, best practice, I mean, are you having a conversation with the seller telling them then these are my legal obligations, that if I find something of this nature that I have to disclose it, and having that conversation, you know, before you go and fill this out and put it with the listing, I'm assuming?
Yeah. So my usually how this happens in the real world is that, you know, your seller will be filling out the real estate condition report and they'll say something like, well, you know, we did get a little bit of water in the basement, but we cleaned it up pretty quickly. And then they're going to ask you, so do I have to disclose that? Okay. I can't give you advice on disclosure because that would be giving legal advice. So I would always say something to the extent of, well, if you don't disclose it, know that I have to because I have the knowledge of the defect.
Okay.
And usually that kind of just flips it in their brains to go ahead and just disclose it because now they know that you will be disclosing it. So anytime I had a seller once that was like, yeah, so we have a mouse infestation here and I don't know, we got the guy out and I think they went away. Should I disclose that? And that was the line I used with him. I said, well, if you don't, I now have to. Thank you for telling me about that, you know? So, and then he ended up then disclosing it on the condition report. So I wouldn't have to, right? that's usually the scenario that you're going to come across. This is pretty, but I think this is common when you're working with trusts and estates and personal representatives. If they are refusing to disclose that, yes, I would still tell this personal representative, hey, just so you know, you can amend the condition report if you feel like you still should not fill one out. That's fine. Know that I have to disclose the water that was in the basement. And that's your duty. So that's how you leave it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Whew. All right. So we're going to flip over to the offer to purchase. I'm just going to kind of show some of the different things about a condo offer to purchase. So that you kind of, I want you to get used to writing a condo offer. So feel free, in the next like couple of days, if you haven't written one, make sure you go through and do that. I'm waiting for this form to load. See the error. There we go. Okay. So this is your residential condominium offer to purchase. It's pretty similar to a regular offer to purchase, aside from a few additional items in here. So down at the bottom of page 1, we have some of those common elements that we talked about. So the first thing is a storage unit. Does the condo have an additional storage unit? So this would be like maybe like a locker, and they would have like an assigned locker number. So whether there is or is not one, make sure you strike it. And then also be specific on what that storage unit number is. I would say most of the time they're numbered the same as the condo number, just for clarity. Parking, the parking for the unit is blank. We want to be specific in what that parking is. So whatever that is, attached to car garage, specific underground spots, and what those numbers are. If there is an additional fee for the parking, you'd want to denote that here. There's not always an additional fee though, so sometimes you'll leave that blank. And then association fee. So this, we can get clarity on how those dues are assessed. So for instance, I think I would have to look back, but I think this one was like $433 a month. Maybe also you come across one that's like $1,000 a quarter, right? So you can talk about the frequency of those condo dues here on the offer. And then the next big piece is that transfer fee. So the buyer is aware the property is subject to a one-time transfer fee. Shall be paid at closing by either the buyer or the seller. Buyer is the default here. So I would just say most likely your buyer is going to foot this bill. I would make sure that your buyer understands how much that amount is. Hopefully it's on the executive summary or somewhere in the condo docs, or you might have to call the association, ask them how much the transfer fee is if it's on the executive summary. I would just make sure that your buyer knows how much it is. I saw one once, or somebody told me of one that was like $3,000 for the transfer fee, and the buyer didn't know they had to pay that at closing. Was not a pretty situation to be in for anybody involved. So please, please, please make sure you understand these transfer fees. Other things that are different about condos are the condo disclosure materials. So this is what we refer to as the condo docs. This provision starts on the bottom of page 2, line 107. Seller agrees to deliver to buyer within 10 days after acceptance of the offer, current and accurate copies of the condo docs. Then it lists A through H of what those condo docs are. Now, again, a good listing agent is going to have these condo docs already uploaded to MLS, and hopefully your buyer can read through at least the executive summary, if not all of the condo docs prior to making an offer. Don't write offers on properties that your buyer doesn't know if they can have their pet. right? So let's make sure we're reading condo docs before we're writing offers.
Kathleen, can you talk a little bit about, so I've been on the listing side of a condo and I just wrote on a condo. I had one of those like 2-unit townhome kind of condos. And there were barely any documents. So, how, obviously this is laid out in the contract that you have to have all of these different things. And if you don't have all of them, basically it could potentially give the buyer an out of the contract. So how specific do you have to be? Or if your condo just doesn't have these documents, legally, are you as the listing agent able to say these documents do not exist? Like, can you talk a little bit about that, since each condo association might be a little different?
Yeah, so actually right here on line 109 in that bracket, it says, except as may be limited for small condominiums per that Wisconsin statute. So there is a statute that does say that these smaller condo units, I think it's, I want to say like under 10, don't quote me on that. But these smaller condo associations might not legally have to have all of these documents on file, right? So yes, a lot of the times with these smaller units, like you're describing, Teresa, like they just don't have these docs because they aren't required to have them, which means I, as a seller, cannot provide them to the buyer, which means the buyer doesn't get them, right? So it's okay for you as a listing agent to say like, hey, look, they're a smaller association, items number C, D, and E just don't exist. And I think at that point in time, it's really, the buyer has to just be okay with it. Like
Okay.
the buyers, I don't think the buyer really has any recourse in them not being provided because they just don't exist, right? It's different if I was withholding documents and like purposefully not providing them to the buyer, but I'm not doing that. I can't get them for you. They don't exist.
Okay.
So yeah, you will see that. And yes, those small associations do not have to have specific documents on file.
Okay.
Conversion condominiums, just for you to be aware of what a conversion condo is, it is something like an elementary school that has now been turned into condos, or a mall that has now been turned into condos. So at one point in time, the existing structure that there was not a condo development, and has since been bought out and turned into condos. With those conversion condos, there are some specific disclosures, engineer reports, things like those, to ensure that they were done properly, with the right firewalls and everything like that. So these 3 documents here are part of those conversion condos, and they are required as well. But considering it would be there would have been an engineer to have to inspect those condos once they were built. So that report should be on file. So buyer rescission rights. You need to note that condo documents are business days. Okay, so seller has 10 days after acceptance to supply the condo docs. Buyer then has 5 business days to review all of those documents that they received from the seller. If the buyer doesn't receive all of the documents required, the buyer can then, within 5 business days, either rescind the offer or request those missing documents. If they request missing documents, the seller then has an additional 5 business days to provide those. And then once they're provided to the buyer then has another 5 business days to review. So I call this like the 5 business day ping pong when it comes to condo docs. This is one of the reasons why it's really important as a listing agent to just get them all before you go on the MLS. Because you help prevent this back and forth between the buyer and seller and all this time that's spent. The buyer does not have to accept the condo docs. This 5 business days is their review period to actually read through all these condo docs to ensure that they accept the terms of these condo docs, because they can't just move into a condo and think they can do whatever they want and get away with it. They have to follow the rules of that condo association. And if they're not willing to abide by the rules outlined in those condo docs, they should not buy this condo. Okay. So that's why the law gives that buyer those 5 business days to read through those disclosure documents and decide whether or not they want to move forward. Okay. So the buyer has full rescission rights for 5 business days after delivery of those documents. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So then we come to this contingency on line 149, which is the contingency for additional condo docs. Listing agents hate it. Buyer's agents use it all the time. So if I was a buyer's agent, I would check the box, because it basically says that if there are any of these additional documents, line 152 to 162, we would also like a copy of those, is what this says. Now, most likely, especially smaller associations, don't have all of these documents, and that's perfectly fine. But if there are financial statements from the last 2 years, I'd probably want to see them as a buyer. I'd probably want to know that they're being well managed and that there's enough money in reserves and that they're not just spending half of their dues on, salaries, and who are these people and why are they even making $70,000 a year, right? Like, I would want to see that stuff if I was buying a condo, so I would check this box. So it's definitely an option for your buyer. I'm not saying as an agent you should just completely default to it, but I think you should have a conversation with the buyer about these documents and also let them know that they might just not exist, right? There might not be an inspection report on file for the roof because they haven't had it inspected. It was built in 2020. It's only 5 years old. Why would we inspect the roof, right? So that's okay. It's okay that these don't exist. But if they do exist, we want the information, is what this says. Note that line 167 here, this comes with those 5 business day rescission rights as well. So if you as a listing agent are giving them like one document, and then a day later another document, and then a day later another document, your 5 business days is per document that's received. Okay, so this is also a really good list. If you can, as a listing agent, just go get this list at the beginning as well, if you can, or at least some of these, because then you can say, hey, buyer's agent, I went ahead and went through the additional condo doc list. I was able to get, a couple of the ones on the item, the rest of them don't exist. I'll send those over to you as well. Feel free to check that contingency if you want. And I would also say this, with this buyer rescission rights on both this additional contingency and just the crash printed condo docs, the buyer doesn't actually have to give any reason why. They can just send a notice that they want out. So they could, like, if they disagreed with 2 words on those condo docs, they can rescind. It's full rescission rights. There is no reason that has to be given by the buyer. Just simply, I don't accept the condo docs, I'm out. And that's all they have to say.
Hey, Kathleen, in this more competitive seller market, is that if it doesn't matter really to your buyer, or they're on the fence about whether they need these additional pieces of information, I'm assuming then if they're okay with it, you leave that blank. But I'm just wondering, like, is that a box, if it's checked since it's an additional contingency, that a seller is really considering as an additional risk? Or when you're trying to eliminate contingencies as a buyer's agent, is that something that really is going to tip the listing agent and the seller over if you're checking that box, I guess, is my question.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like, yes and no. If you were against another offer and materially everything else in the offer was the same, except that you had this contingency and the other one didn't, I obviously would go with the other one that didn't have the contingency. It's not necessarily an additional risk per se. It's that it just gives this buyer additional way to get out of the offer. So, but there's like one, but then I also like see this, okay, so like line 156 here, the association certificate of insurance. If you're getting a mortgage on a condo, the lender has to have that certificate of insurance. The association has to be insured as well as the homeowner gets homeowner's insurance. So I look at that and I'm like, well, we're going to need that anyways if we're getting a loan, right? So I don't, in the list of things that make an offer competitive, I say this is towards the bottom,
Sure.
you know, and maybe you just know like, hey, because we're asking for these additional things and some other people don't, would you come up on price to give us a little bit a better competitive advantage that way or something, you know, like I think there's other things that you can do to make it more competitive, but it is like the one contingency in this offer, right? Aside from like financing, inspection, and appraisal. So I don't know. It's definitely up to the buyers to do.
Okay.
I don't know. Personally, I'm just saying personally, if I were to buy a condo, I would not be comfortable buying one without some additional information as well.
Okay.
So
Thanks.
that's how buyers get trapped into these associations that are constantly doing special assessments on their units because they don't have any money in the bank, but we didn't get financial statements, so we couldn't walk. Okay, small condo 203, Teresa, to circle back, is less than 12 units. So yeah, if it is less than 12 units, a lot of those documents they don't have to have, and so won't be provided. Okay. Other than that, it's all pretty much the same as every other offer to purchase. There's a lot of things that go into financing condos though, which I will save for you to connect with a lender about. Because I am not a mortgage expert. But yeah, everything else is just the same as a residential offer to purchase. So what other questions do we have?
I don't think I have any other questions. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's just, I mean, you've at least done one, Teresa, so, you know, you're a little bit more familiar with it. I would just keep thinking about like how you can do justice for your buyers with condos. For me, it was always reading that executive summary before I went on showings. If I couldn't read one beforehand, I would at least try to print the executive summary and give it to them at the showing. I am not in the habit of just writing offers that aren't going to get accepted, right? Like if I'm going to take my time to write an offer, it's going to get accepted. So I'm not going to write offers for buyers that are just going to back out because they don't like what's on the executive summary. So we're going to do our due diligence before we see condos. And I know sometimes it's really hard in a hot market, things move fast. So at least try to print it off and hand it to them so that by the time they get home, maybe they've read through it. So you're not wasting your time writing offers that they're going to back out of. That would just be one of my biggest advice for condos is just make sure you know what you're walking into on them. And they're all different. They're all completely different. So, okay. All right. That's all I had.